Welcome to This Weekend Coworking, where industry leaders get succinct, actionable insights.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the This Weekend Coworking podcast feed. I'm Hector Kolonas, and I'm joined once again by LaRosa. We're going to dive into the biggest stories from this week's newsletter. What we're going to talk about this week is how to take a break when everything seems like it's up in the air. Who raised $20 million in our industry or around our industry? How is one Romanian firm categorizing co-working and flex spaces into 6 different categories? Are ads the new revenue source that no one's talking about? And what could you really do for International Coworking Day? But before we do that, Mike, how are you?
I'm great. I'm glad to be back. I'm back in my blue bubble, so I'm on the road again. But it's been a good summer so far, and I'm looking forward to recapping these week's stories.
It's good to be back. We took a couple of weeks off as we were both being pulled off in our actual real day jobs. But it's good to be back here with you, Mike. Talking about day jobs, this week's newsletter is sponsored by Syncaroo. We actually put together a little bit of a comparison about one of our most popular services, which is called Managed Integration Services. And we really compared it to if you have ever told someone why a flex space is better than a traditional lease, then you understand why managed integration services will work for a co-working space. It's essentially a plan or a flat fee plan where you get support, guidance, tech therapy, implementation, development, all in one neat package so that you and your team can focus on what you need to do and not continuously go out and get scopes and try and train developers and beg the integration companies to do what they need to do. You instead have one point of contact, and that's something we're reintroducing after keeping it a little bit under wraps as we scaled out that offering. Going from there, I know there's a lot going on, and as you can tell from my gray hairs and the speed in which I'm speaking, we find it's very important to find ways to take a break throughout the day of being a co-working space operator or owner or anyone related to this industry. So one of the first links I shared this week was about I think it was 9 different ways to take a 60 to 90 second meditation and just recenter yourself. I did a graph this morning with one of the teams I work with where I'm like, my week this week was like 15% doing important work with exec teams, 5% working on the newsletter, and the rest doing 60-second meditations. I don't know if you feel that way, Mike, but that's definitely been my week.
Yeah, no, I loved the inclusion of this piece. I've most definitely been leaning into the when you hit a wall or you're having that moment, just think of 3 things that you're grateful for. And they could be as simple as I have air conditioning, or I'm employed, or or I'm in a comfortable chair. No matter what. But I do find that with everything that is just going on, and it seems like the world just keeps on moving faster and faster in a more stressful pace, it wouldn't be unreasonable for those of you working on the front lines of hospitality to also be absorbing some of that from your members as well. I believe that a lot of empaths are in the co-working industry. I think it's a critical and important quality to have to foster that community in sorts, and the job alone is stressful enough, let alone also supporting members. So this was a really great piece to include. And if you're listening and you're having a tough day, I encourage you to open up that email and check out the post.
Well said, Mike. And obviously we are here to help de-stress as much as possible, trying to bring the chaos that is the co-working fire hose into a succinct, actionable resource. And on that note, we're going to dive into just one of the 4 or 5 data sources or data drops we saw from across the co-working world this week. I really like this one coming out of a company called Beyond Space. A gentleman called Tudor shared it. And it's all about how in Romania, they're doing a market study and they're categorizing flex and co-working spaces into 5 categories. I said 6 earlier, but it's actually 5 categories. And it's always interesting to see this in every region or across regions, because what one region classifies as a premium flex or an economy product is very different from, let's say, what you'll see in London or Mumbai or Johannesburg. So it's really interesting to see these kind of studies and compare and contrast I know we've talked about it a whole bunch, Mike. Do we need a global standard? Is there a 5-star? Is there a 3-star? Is there a motel rating system that we can bring into the industry? And seeing more and more reports like this will allow us to see if that's even feasibly possible. You know, from the hotel world, a 5-star in some countries is not the same as a 5-star in another country, but it does give some guidance to travelers. So your thoughts around just this kind of market study and what it could mean for the taxonomies of how we categorize co-working?
Yeah, I think that this is just another step towards the right direction of exactly what you just laid out there. I think that sometimes I get frustrated with some things go too fast in this industry and some things I feel don't go fast enough. And I think that sometimes it's easy to forget that these other industries that we're comparing ourselves to, in particular, in this case, the hotel industry, the modern hotel industry really came about from Conrad Hilton in the 40s and 50s. But when you're born in the 80s, it's always been there, right? So you just think to yourself, they've always had this, but they didn't always have this. And if we say that co-working was born in the aughts, maybe we're just now getting to that marker on the timeline. This was really cool. I really liked the thoughtfulness that they took into the ways that they were categorizing and classifying the spaces. And I really hope that this encourages the end of the that's not co-working argument. One of the things I've been most frustrated with in my decade plus experience is that there are still so many people that are so defensive or argumentative about what is or is not co-working, and it's 99% based on their own personal definition. And we've had this conversation many times about different terms, and it's not just like a language barrier, right? Because it's lost in translation, right? Hot desk, the phrase hot desk in English does not necessarily translate to every other language because they might actually think that desk is hot, right? I think that this is just a really great next step forward. It was really cool to see that it was coming out of Romania. It's a country that's not often in discussion on these chats that we have. I can't tell you the last time we talked about co-working data or co-working news from Romania. I think it's an overall positive, and I would encourage folks in the industry that have some sway over these types of conversations to maybe use this as inspiration as to a way to continue the conversation and the dialogue and see how can we maybe work towards a greater industry standard.
Well said. And just to reiterate those, the classification is based on amenities, design atmosphere, community events, privacy levels, the target clientele, the pricing models, and the membership structures. All things that kind of are changing or are very different across different kinds of brands. And I think a pretty fair way to categorize, is this a corporate space? Is it not? Is it for lawyers? So it's a really interesting way to approach it. And I agree that we should see more and more regional reports like this. Like we've just seen one out of the UK a couple of months ago, this one out of Romania. Hopefully we'll start to see more maybe on the state level here in the US, because it's quite a large and very different country across. For folks who've never been to America, I had no idea before I got here. I was totally oblivious. I thought it was one country where everyone was the same, everything was the same, but I was very wrong. And so maybe we'll see a state by state play of something like this coming out from someone with enough data and insight into this region. And I don't know if it's going to be an aggregator or someone else, but I would love to see more reports coming out like this, kind of trying to shape up the definitions of what is a premium, what's economy, etc.
Yep.
Now, on the topic of aggregators and platforms, congrats go out to the team at Kadence. They just announced a $20 million raise. If you are unaware of what Kadence do, they are predominantly in the HR tech space for managing and coordinating remote teams, similar to some other platforms, which we'll get into in a second. But they also have a co-working element through their partnership with Liquid Space, where they allow the multitude of massive companies who use their platform to be able to drop into a network of co-working spaces. So We have a feeling they're going to double down on this and grow out their network. They have got international expansion as part of this raise. So it's going to be really interesting to watch what Dan and the team do with this raise.
Yeah, Kadence is a really fascinating story from a tech startup perspective. They did not originally start in anything close to hybrid workforce. They actually, I believe, were working on like wireless charging and like desk sensors. And so they are a pre-COVID startup. And when COVID hit, they very quickly started getting requests from some of their desk sensor clients to ask, how can you help us better either track usage or assign seats? And so that's really, startups are all about the pivot, right? So this was really cool to see. And what I've liked so much about them is that they are AI powered, but they don't cram the word and phrase AI down everyone's throats. They're using it to process the core functionality. They're not using it as icing on the cake and decorative curtains, right? Whole problem that they're solving is helping hybrid teams better coordinate and schedule who's going to be where when. So they are still primarily, and they have over 600 customers. They've really grown quite large. They're primarily helping those customers better use their own space. And that integration partnership with Liquid Space that you referenced is more so a, hey, if this team is on the road and there's no office in that market, then that's when you then defer to that flex workspace on demand component. It really is a well-designed, thought out product. I'm a big fan of that team. Congrats to them. It's exciting to see. There's been a kind of a pause on a lot of fundraising in the last few months to almost a year now. So maybe this will break that freeze, and maybe other folks will be able to raise off of this news.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. And future of work investments have been stagnant since around January, at least in the US, as folks playing the wait and see game, right? There is a lot of, as the VC say, dry powder to deploy, but everyone is just watching and waiting to see what's going to happen with office, what's going to happen with tariffs, what's going to happen with all the kind of political and economical confusion. And so it's good to see that they were able to raise, close their round, and grow. I don't know the deal terms. I have reached out to Dan and the team to see if we can get him to join us on the pod to dig into the deal structure, what it means for their business, but also what it means for the partners, their partners, and Liquid Space's partners who could see an upside because of this. Once we know if that's going to happen, we'll let you all know in an upcoming episode. But we're definitely digging into that as quickly as we can. On the tech side and the kind of revenue side, if you are following the newsletter or our social channels, you know that I'm about this deep into building an undercurrents into the future revenue stack. And it's really interesting. One of the conversations I had last week from a team on the other side of the world from where I am is a growing line item in their revenue stack is selling ads on their digital signage. So in their meeting rooms that are not being used, in kind of their entryways, in their kitchens, etc., handpicking brands and then charging them to be on those signs is a growing part of their business, which is really interesting. But it's also something that was popped into the newsletter this week as we saw the German digital signage company called Freeman, which is actually part of Axel Springer, securing a deal to expand their WeWork digital signage deal into another 782 locations, 782 displays across 183 locations. We did mention them a little bit earlier in the newsletter. They made a deal for a pilot in Germany to basically run the ads that show up on these screens on behalf of WeWork. This pilot obviously went well, and now they're expanding into the rest of the US and Canadian locations. It'll be really interesting to see as they're changing their business model from like a rev share to a freemium play to a more SaaS play, how this will impact the revenues for WeWork, which is no longer public, so we won't be able to see those numbers. But it'll be really interesting to see if other operators go in with someone like Freeman or do it themselves, really understanding that there is a really good, desirable audience within your four walls that advertisers might want to pay a premium to get in front of.
Yeah, as a marketing guru yourself, and as a former advertising salesperson in my past life, I love this idea. It's not a new concept. We've had out of home advertising, any train station, airport, billboards on the highway. This is something that I've been tracking for quite some time. WeWork's been doing some different type of variable of this for as long as they've been around. I mean, they were selling their own ads for a while. I guess the only question I have is people are already assumed to have or already wired and programmed to see ads in public spaces. But you don't see them, and I hate to draw the parallel again to hotels outside of the lobby, right? There's no display ads in the hallway outside my room here. So I wonder where that balance is of how much advertising will people accept in their workspace. Workspaces are designed to be productive spaces. You want them to be energetic, but you don't want them to be full of distractions. And so I'm sure that these are all things that they've taken into consideration. I think it's a great source of revenue for these companies. It would be interesting to see when you said that they've got 782 displays across 183 WeWork locations. A rough breakdown means 7 per location. So where are those 7 most trafficked areas? Maybe the elevator bays, maybe it's the front desk, maybe it's in the community space or the kitchen areas. Congrats to them. I know that there were a lot of different players that WeWork was considered and a lot of different potential roads that they've gone down. No surprise that division of Axel Springer landed it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And just going back to an experience I had in similar space when I was growing, included in the UK and in London, we had a few partner locations who had both digital signage options and a chalkboard in their kitchen. And we ran 2 different campaigns on the different mediums. And 9 out of 10 times, the chalkboard that was handwritten with a little smiley face got better engagement, more photos, more people going to the link than anything we put on digital signage. So really interesting. I do think there is a bit of advertising fatigue. You can't switch on half of the smart TVs this day without seeing ads on the devices you've already purchased. So I do feel that it's a very fine line, and it does come down to curation, right? If you are a WeWork and you have tens of thousands of customers, could you piss off an executive when they're walking into a meeting room and they see an advert for a competitor? That is a risk that personally I would not be willing to take, but is the revenue model enough there that they can not worry about that? Or is the API good enough so that they know who's booking the meeting room and it digitally changes the ads?
Then that's why we love you, Hector, because not only did you have great insight like that, but also you have this hopeful optimism that there's a technological backend that can do that. I can, without yucking on their yum, I can probably bet a lot that there probably isn't that way. There's no Adidas ad running whenever a meeting room is booked by Nike. I don't know if they're that, but you raise a good point that makes me think of Trader Joe's, right? Trader Joe's still has all those chalk paint boards everywhere, right? That's what people take the photos of. That's what people post online, or those chalkboards outside the restaurants. Like,
and the coffee shops,
worst sandwich one woman ever had on Yelp. So yeah, it's all interesting. It should be great to watch this develop and see what it leads to, right? I mean, is this just the start? What does the future look like when it comes off of the screen? We're very close to an AR, VR world. And what's the privacy? And how do you protect yourself from being just like overwhelmed with just all these different messages? Well, I don't want to go into a workspace and be in a what was that Tom Cruise movie where all the ads are all floating and they're specifically talking to you, right? Like,
Yeah,
so
it's really interesting. Like I'm getting like flashbacks of 3 or 4 different Black Mirror episodes, like this like dystopian terror that I can imagine, especially as margins get tighter and people are looking for additional revenue source. How do you balance that experience with the revenue that you need to generate per member, especially as PE gets more involved, as landlords get squeezed by banks? There's going to be this push to get more revenue per member. And advertising is always that golden handcuff for almost everything digital. We see it at the newsletter. We try our hardest to do the patron status. We're experimenting now with people profiles so that we can self-fund as a community. But sponsorship is what kind of keeps the lights on, right? It's part of the business model. We do hard work every single week to figure out, are the partners, are the sponsors, are the ads we're putting on helpful to the audience, as opposed to just charging to put up a casino ad, for example, who would love to pay to get to all of you guys, but we have to draw that line somewhere. So it's going to be really interesting to see as ads become more proliferated into these spaces, who's going to be the one that draws that line? Will a line be drawn, or is it just going to be ads everywhere, Times Square in the meeting room? And then going back to my optimism, who's coming into the meeting room, you know who they're meeting, automatically generate a welcome screen welcoming that brand. That technology is there. It's just ads pay you money instead of you paying money for technology. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. Now, I want to end on a more positive note. Let's get back from the dystopian terror that we were digging in and get back to next month in a couple of, I think it's 2 weeks from now. It's going to be International Coworking Day. Office R&D put together a list of a couple of ideas for what you could do as a co-working space to celebrate International Co-working Day. For folks who do not know, this is the 20th year since that initial blog post went out, coining the term co-working for sharing space and ideas with people around you. So I definitely think you should celebrate it. Now, almost every year, there is a tendency to do a free co-working day, give passes out to people, let them try co-working. And I love that for many reasons. We've discussed whether free co-working days work ad nauseum in this podcast, but I do looking at other ways. Can you go and form new partnerships, new relationships with the neighborhood businesses? Can you have a breakfast with all the community managers in your area and just celebrate that you're all part of the same ecosystem? Can you go and create value for your existing members, people who are already believers in co-working, who are seeing the benefits and reaping the rewards? Can you give them something? Don't be like the mobile phone companies who only give good deals to the new customers. Go back and use this 20th year anniversary or celebration to really reward your team, reward yourselves, take a moment to breathe, and focus on the next 20 years. We'll be back in your podcast feed next week. Mike, thank you as always for hopping in from your blue bubble, and I cannot wait to dig into some more.
Yeah. See ya.